Hello, my name is Glennon Louder with Louder Labs. I'm going to be showing you guys how I've created my my NetApp lab at home, and I've had several people ask me how I've done this, and I'm going to show you, in my opinion, the easiest way to do this. And we'll be using a lot of tools today, but first of all, you need to download some of those tools. So you need to log into your NetApp account and take a look in the utility tool chest. When you're here, do a search for Simulate OnTap, and you're going to grab a couple files. So you can download some of the old stuff. As of today, this is October 4th, 2014. So the latest version available today is 8.2.1. Hopefully here shortly, in a couple weeks. It's right before the NetApp Insight. Hopefully 8.3 will become available here soon, but anyways, as of the making of this video, 8.2.1 is the latest version. Here's some hardware requirements for today. I'm going to be deploying this in my ESXi 5.5 lab. You can do this with VMware Workstation, and you can use Player and a bunch of other things, but for the way that I'm going to show you today, the way my method will work with ESXi as well as VMware Workstation. So download it in either 7 mode or Cluster Data OnTap. For this case today, we're going to deploy a 7 mode. I'll create another video with Cluster Data OnTap. So if you're going to deploy it in VMware Workstation, make sure you download this top one, or Player or Fusion. If you're going to deploy this in ESX, like I am today, then you need to download these versions. These are the licenses for 7 mode and Cluster Data OnTap. So once again, if you're using this for 7 mode, which we are, I'm just going to leave this open so we can just grab the licenses a little bit later when we're doing our licensing. So go ahead and grab those files, and then don't forget the documentation. Read the manual. So I already have those files downloaded, but I just wanted to show you where to grab them. So I actually have those files on a user share on my home network, and I'm just going to give you a little 10-cent tour of my VMware environment. So I have this running on a couple of HP DL360 Gen 5 servers downstairs in my basement. One of them's got a couple quad cores and has a couple dual cores. Each one has 32 gigs of RAM. You don't need quite that much hardware to mess around with, but I have a lot running, so I've got a little game server here for hosting Team Fortress 2, and here's Louder Lab. So here's my domain controller that I have running in my house, and then here's my NetApp production lab. So here's one NetApp Simulator running in 7 mode called Gen. We're going to deploy another one called Moss this evening. Maybe another one named Roy. Yes, those are names from the IT crowd. Love that show. And then here's my Cluster Data OnTap environment. 2 nodes there, Epsilon 1 and 2. If you know what Epsilon is, more power to you. Show you're a true NetApp person. And then I've also deployed the OnCommand Unified Manager for Cluster Data OnTap virtual appliance, which is going to I don't know, maybe I'll show another video on that later. But I just wanted to mess around with that. I do have it tied into an SMTP server, so I get alerts on the environment for when for hitting thresholds, and I just test out a bunch of stuff there. Also a Ubuntu 9 or a Ubuntu 12 server, and then a Windows 2012 Data Center Edition, another domain controller. In this one I have a bunch of iSCSI LUNs mounted using snap drive from both the Cluster Data OnTap, well, the cluster as well as the 7 mode system. And that's just kind of my production lab there. I also have an OS Nexus's QuantaStore virtual appliance that I've been messing around with. as well as a Windows 10 machine that I was messing around with the other day. That was released the other day, so I've been tinkering around with that. So there's a look at my lab. We're going to be deploying into the virtual machine here in this 7-mode resource pool. You don't need to use resource pools, but you're welcome to. So, a couple of things you're going to need for this. First of all, if you're doing this in ESXi, you'll need your vSphere client. Like I said, I have to be running ESXi 5.5.0 update 2, and this is the new VMware vSphere client from update 2, which will allow me to edit virtual machine version 10, which is handy. Thank you VMware for finally fixing that. And as well as this tool here. This is kind of a central piece of this whole video, is this VMware vCenter Converter Standalone client. Nice little tool, and you will need the NetApp on-command System Manager 3.1.1. As I mentioned, Data OnTap 8.3 will be coming out soon, hopefully. And in the next version of 8.3, on-command System Manager, which will be version 3.2 at that time, will be actually deployed, or I shouldn't say deployed, but it will be installed and running from within Data OnTap, which could be kind of nice. So anyways, but for our case today, for 8.2.1, you will need that later to control Data OnTap, or you can just use the command line, which is to each his own. It depends what you want to do. So, first off here, open up your VMware vCenter Converter Standalone tool, and I was messing around with this earlier just to make sure things were going to work. This version is 5.5.2. I've also used 5.5.0. It works fine as well. I just wanted to test out the latest and greatest here. Now, the configure machine is a handy tool. It allows you to basically configure a machine that is already configured on an ESX host or workstation. And allows you to basically it makes it easier to edit an already existing machine. For our case this evening, though, we are going to need to do a convert machine. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be selecting a backup image or third-party virtual machine, which is what we're doing. And you're going to want to browse to the file. Now, before we do that, a little caveat here. The simulator file that you download, it's going to download as a tar.gz file, which you'll then need to uncompress into a tarball and then uncompress again into just the regular file. I did have a couple of issues with that. I think I ended up having to use 7-zip to get it all to work. Anyways, what you should end up with when you're done is a folder that has this VMware, or excuse me, the Data OnTap Simulator. I just named it vsim_ESX-7 mode. You'll open that up. Actually, I think it comes named that. But you just want to make sure that you have the CF card, the UML, and if you open these up, well, it's showing nothing because it's looking for a VMX file. This VMX file is basically the virtual machine right here. So you're going to select that, and then I'm going to hit next. Now, the converter standalone tool, it's going to chew on that VMX file for a while here and just kind of take a look around and make sure what it needs. It's also going to utilize that UML and the CF card file to basically extrapolate the virtual machine out of there. And then it's going to allow us to do some other configuration of it, which if you're deploying it according to the documentation, which I would highly recommend, you won't be able to, there's more things you can do with using the converter tool than you would normally be able to do with the documentation. So while it's chewing on that, here's the documentation, which you should become very familiar with. We're going to be doing this installing it on VMware vSphere. So it goes through creating a cluster network. You only need to do that if you're creating a cluster, as in a clustered Data OnTap cluster. If you're doing a 7 mode, you can pretty much skip down to configuring your cluster Data OnTap simulators, because that's the first part you're going to need after I'm done showing you what to do. So coming back here, this is asking me to log into my ESXi host, or if you were doing a virtual VMware workstation, here's where you would select virtual VMware workstation. So let me log in real quick. And this is just so it's logged in. It wants me to name it. I said I was going to name it Moss. And these are just the other virtual machines that are there in the environment. It's just showing you this so that you don't name it a virtual machine that you've already named. So I'm going to select next. It's going to ask me about my resource pool. I want to put in my 7 mode resource pool. It's going to ask about a data store and the VMware machine version. Now I'm going to select version 10 because since I'm using the ESXi 5.5 update 2, I can edit this version, and so yeah, next. Now it's going to go to this options page. Don't just skip over this. This is kind of the whole reason that we're using this tool. Now I want to thin provision all this because, as you can see from the previous page, I don't have a ton of space, 388 gigs. So I'm going to thin provision all of this. You can thick provision these other small ones if you want, and thin provision the main space. These are, do what you like there. This is where you can configure how much RAM and CPU you want to give it. I'm going to give it a little bit more RAM because I'm a nice guy. And here's where you can configure it with your different CPUs. I have 2 dual core or 2 quad cores on this one, so I'm going to give it 2 dual core machines. I've tried everything from 2 quad cores. You could, do anything you want there. I have not tried multiples of like 3 duals. I have done 2 single cores, and I have done 2 dual cores, and I've done 2 quad cores. I have not, however, tried 4 dual cores. I don't know. Mess around with whatever you want to do there. Let me know how it works. Now here's the other part that a lot of people, I've seen other blogs about trying to get more virtual interfaces and hacking it in the simulator. This is the easiest way. Select 6 interfaces. They all come in as E0, A, B, C, D, and E, and F. They just work really nice that way. I'm going to throw these on 2 other networks that I've got vSwitches created in my VMware environment, just to allow you to mess around with other things. Now you can select all the different versions of the VMware adapters. Yeah, I'm just going to select auto for here. So I don't want it to power on automatically, because when it boots up the first time, it will just sit there in boot loop until you do a couple things, which I will show you when we get it first boot up. So I have this the way I want it, pretty sure. I'm going to do this summary page, and I'm going to double check here. So name it Moss, VMware version 10. There's my ESXi host. It's a host system. It's 7 mode. Is the resource pool. Power for version no. 2 dual cores. 2 gigs of RAM. Excuse me. And then there's my NICs. Disk controller type. Disk-based cloning. Anyway, 4 disks. There they are. They're all thin provision, and configuration data store coming out of the only data store I have. So just making sure everything goes okay there. I'm going to click finish, and it's going to submit the job to the VMware vSphere the ESXi host. Now I can log in here, and I can see there's the creating virtual machine. And if I open up this, open up 7 mode, and look, there's my virtual machine. Now it's not done yet, but it submitted the job. The virtual machine's created, and now it's pulling those files from my share, and it's basically deploying the virtual machine right now in my ESXi host. And I can watch that job running over here in the VMware vCenter Converter standalone tool. And you can see here's this job running here, estimated time running 1 hour. Now, I've done this a couple times today, and many other times. Usually don't take an hour. You'll notice this one ran in 22 minutes, so quite a bit shorter. Pushed about 5.7 megs a second, which is alright. If you want to watch paint dry, you could go ahead and check your ESXi host here and look at the performance. And you could probably see the network spiking here as it pushes it over to the ESXi host. But I won't bore you, so I'm going to minimize this, and I will come back when this is completed and I'll show you some other fun stuff.